There are moments in life when the very air around you feels different. The things that once satisfied your soul suddenly feel empty. The places that once brought comfort now feel restrictive. The conversations that once excited you now seem dull and meaningless. It is as if something within you is being uprooted, stretched, reshaped. But what if this unsettling feeling is not a sign of loss, but of preparation? What if the very discomfort you are experiencing is the evidence that God is moving in your life? Think for a moment, has there ever been a time when God elevated someone without first preparing them? Look at the life of Joseph. He had a dream of greatness, a vision of leadership, but before he could reach the palace, he had to endure betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. Was this a sign of God abandoning him? No. Every hardship was a step toward his destiny. Every rejection was a redirection. Every moment of suffering was refining him for the weight of the blessing that was coming. Perhaps you feel like you are in a pit right now, forgotten, overlooked, stuck in a season of waiting. But I ask you, could it be that God is not punishing you but preparing you? Could it be that the things you have lost, the doors that have closed, the people who have walked away, were never meant to go with you into your next season? When God prepares someone for a major level up, He does not do it lightly. He does not simply bless without first strengthening. He does not elevate without first refining. The discomfort you feel, the trials you are facing, the silence you are enduring, these are not signs that God has forgotten you, but that He is working in the unseen. Remember the story of David. He was anointed to be king, but he did not step into his throne immediately. Instead, he was sent back to the fields to tend sheep. Instead of honor, he faced opposition. Instead of being crowned, he was hunted. And yet in that season of hiding, God was training him. The battles he fought in secret, the lions and bears he conquered in the wilderness, were strengthening him for the moment he would stand before Goliath. Many people want the blessing, but they do not want the preparation. They want the reward, but they resist the process. But my friend, God does not place crowns on untested heads. He does not give authority to those who have not been refined by the fire. He does not pour out favor on those who are not ready to carry it. So if you feel like you are being pressed on every side, if you feel like you are walking through fire, do not despise this season. It is not here to destroy you, it is here to prepare you. Think of gold. It does not become valuable until it has been purified by fire. It does not shine until it has been melted, refined, and stripped of its impurities. And so it is with you. The fire you are facing is not a sign of abandonment, it is the proof that God sees something precious in you. He is stripping away the things that are holding you back. He is removing what cannot go with you into your future. The Bible tells us in Isaiah 43:19, "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." But notice something, the new thing God is doing is not always obvious at first. It requires faith. It requires trust. It requires the willingness to let go of what is comfortable and step into the unknown. Abraham was told to leave his homeland and go to a place God would show him. He did not have a map. He did not have all the answers. He only had faith. And because of his obedience, God made him the father of many nations. But what if he had resisted? What if he had clung to what was familiar? He would have missed the greater blessing God had in store. And what about you? Could it be that God is asking you to step out in faith? Could it be that He is calling you to release something, an old mindset, a toxic relationship, a fear that has kept you bound so that He can take you to the next level? The problem is that many of us are praying for change, but resisting the very process that brings it. We are asking for elevation, but clinging to the weights that hold us down. We want the blessings of the promised land, but we refuse to leave the wilderness. But hear me, you cannot enter your next season while clinging to the remnants of the past. If you have been feeling an unshakable restlessness, if you sense that something within you is shifting, do not ignore it. It is not your imagination. It is not a coincidence. It is God's way of awakening your spirit to the new thing He is about to do. You may not see the full picture yet. You may not understand why certain things are happening the way they are. But just because you do not see the evidence does not mean God is not working. Behind the scenes, He is aligning people, orchestrating events, and moving pieces into place for your breakthrough. But the question is, will you trust Him in the process? Will you trust that the fire is not here to burn you, but to refine you? Will you trust that the shaking is not to break you, but to position you? Will you trust that what looks like loss is actually making room for something greater? God does not prepare everyone this way. Some people are content where they are. Some people settle for a life far below what God intended. But if you are feeling this divine restlessness, if you are sensing this holy discontent, it is because you are not called to live an ordinary life. You are being prepared for more. And so I ask you, are you ready? If you have been questioning what is happening in your life, if you have been wondering why everything feels uncertain, let me tell you, you are not losing. You are leveling up. But before you step into the next season, you need to recognize the signs. You need to understand the ways in which God prepares His chosen ones for elevation. Because if you do not recognize the process, you might resist it. And if you resist it, you might delay what God is trying to do in your life. So, let's talk about the 7 signs that God is preparing you for a major level up. Sign 1. Sudden discomfort in familiar places. There comes a time in the journey of faith when the places that once brought comfort begin to feel foreign. The conversations that once satisfied your soul now seem empty. The routines that once felt fulfilling now feel like chains holding you back from something greater. This is not a sign of failure or confusion. This is divine discomfort. It is God stirring your spirit because you are outgrowing your current season. Look at the story of the Israelites in Egypt. For years they lived under oppression, yet many of them had grown accustomed to it. When God sent Moses to lead them out, not all of them were ready to leave. Some longed to return to the very place that had enslaved them. Why? Because sometimes familiarity feels safer than the unknown. Even when God is calling us higher, the temptation to cling to what is familiar can be overwhelming. But if you feel discomfort in familiar places, if the things that once fit now feel out of place, that is a spiritual indicator God is moving you. There is a reason why a bird eventually grows restless in the nest. A time comes when its wings must stretch beyond the comfort of what has always been. It must leap before it can soar. If it remains in the nest, it will never fulfill its purpose. And so the mother bird begins to make the nest uncomfortable, removing the soft feathers, making the branches sharper. Why? Because the discomfort is necessary for the flight. Is God making your nest uncomfortable? Are you feeling restless in the very places where you once thrived? Are relationships shifting? Are old passions fading? If so, do not resist it, embrace it. The Bible says in Deuteronomy 32:11, like an eagle that stirs up its nest and hovers over its young, that spreads its wings to catch them and carries them aloft. God does not allow discomfort to harm you. He allows it to push you into your divine assignment. Joseph, before stepping into his destiny, had to leave the comfort of his father's house. But he did not leave by choice. He was sold into slavery, stripped of everything familiar. What he did not realize at the time was that the very place that had once been his comfort was no longer where he was meant to be. God had something greater in store. But first he had to endure the discomfort. If you are feeling out of place, it is because you are no longer meant to stay where you are. God is not allowing you to settle because He has more for you. So ask yourself, are you resisting change? Are you trying to force comfort in a place God is trying to move you from? The discomfort you feel is not punishment, it is preparation. God is calling you higher. The question is, will you trust Him enough to leave the nest? Sign 2, unusual delays and closed doors. Nothing tests faith quite like waiting. You pray for an opportunity, but the doors remain shut. You step forward in obedience, but nothing seems to move. You cry out for answers, but heaven seems silent. This, my friend, is not rejection, it is divine delay. It is God's way of positioning you for something far greater than what you could orchestrate on your own. Consider the story of Lazarus. When he was sick, his sisters sent word to Jesus, expecting him to come immediately, but Jesus delayed. And in that delay, Lazarus died. To them, the delay seemed cruel. It seemed like abandonment. But Jesus knew something they did not. The delay was necessary for a greater miracle. When Jesus finally arrived, he did not simply heal Lazarus, he resurrected him. What they had seen as a setback was, in reality, a setup for greater glory. Had Jesus come when they wanted, they would have only witnessed a healing. But because of the delay, they witnessed resurrection power. Could it be that the doors you are waiting on are not opening because God is preparing something greater? Could it be that the delay is not denial but protection? So many people rush into things before their time. They settle for relationships that are not meant for them because they are impatient. They force opportunities that are not aligned with their calling because they cannot endure the wait. But God does not operate on human timetables. Isaiah 60:22 says, "When the time is right, I, the Lord, will make it happen." When God prepares you for a level up, He often closes doors that you are not yet ready to walk through. The delay is not because He is withholding from you, it is because He is strengthening you. Sometimes the worst thing that could happen is for you to receive a blessing prematurely. David was anointed king as a teenager, but he did not step into his throne immediately. He spent years being pursued by Saul, hiding in caves, enduring trials that seemed unfair. But what was happening in that season? God was preparing him for the throne. The delay was necessary, because without it, he would not have developed the character to sustain the position. If God has delayed something in your life, do not grow weary. Do not allow frustration to make you move ahead of His timing. Because here is the truth: if a door has closed, it is not meant for you right now. And if something has been delayed, it is because the appointed time has not yet come. Look at the life of Sarah. She was promised a child, but the fulfillment did not come immediately. She waited, and in her impatience she tried to force the promise through Hagar. But that was not God's will. And because she rushed ahead, she created unnecessary strife. Had she simply trusted God's timing, she would have avoided the pain that came from trying to force what only God could provide. Waiting is hard, but the greatest blessings often come after seasons of delay. So if you are in a season where doors seem closed, do not be discouraged. It is not a sign that God has forgotten you. It is a sign that He is setting things up perfectly. He is aligning people, orchestrating details, moving in ways you cannot yet see. And when the time is right, what you thought was lost will come together in ways greater than you imagined. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time." Your time is coming. Your doors will open, but not a moment too soon. Will you trust the delay? Will you surrender to the process instead of forcing the outcome? Because when God finally moves, everything will make sense. Sign 3: increased isolation and separation. There is a peculiar pain that comes with being set apart, a loneliness that does not always make sense. The friends you once relied on begin to fade away. The people you thought would always be there become distant. You may feel like you are losing everything, but I want you to understand this is not rejection, it is refinement. When God prepares you for a major level up, He does not let you remain surrounded by the same people, especially if they cannot go where He is taking you. There are seasons when He will intentionally isolate you, not to harm you, but to elevate you. Think about Jesus. Before He began His ministry, what did the Spirit do? Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Matthew 4:1. The Spirit led Him there. It was not the enemy, it was not people, it was God Himself. Why? Because there are things you can only learn in isolation. There are transformations that can only happen when distractions are removed. Moses was isolated for 40 years in the wilderness before he was called to lead Israel out of Egypt. Joseph was alone in prison before he was lifted to the palace. David spent years in solitude, tending sheep and hiding in caves before he was crowned king. Every great move of God is preceded by separation. Could it be that the people leaving your life were never meant to stay? Could it be that their absence is not a loss, but a divine adjustment? Sometimes the people closest to you are the very ones limiting your growth, not because they are evil, but because they are not aligned with your destiny. Some relationships are seasonal, yet we try to make them permanent. We hold on to what God is trying to remove, but if we refuse to let go, we only delay what God is trying to do. Remember Abraham and Lot. God called Abraham to leave his homeland, but instead of going alone, he took Lot with him. Yet later, conflict arose. Lot had to separate from Abraham before God could fully bless him. It was after Lot left that God spoke to Abraham and reaffirmed his promise. Genesis 13:14-15 says, "After Lot had separated from him, the Lord said to Abram, 'Lift up your eyes from where you are and look north and south, east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever.'" Why did God wait until Lot left? Because some people cannot go where God is taking you. Their presence is a limitation. Their influence is a distraction. Separation is painful, but it is necessary. If God is pulling people out of your life, do not fight to keep them. Let them go. You do not need their approval. You do not need their validation. The only thing you need is to stay in alignment with God's will. Because when God removes people, He replaces them with something greater. So if you are feeling isolated, do not see it as punishment, see it as preparation. God is setting you apart for something greater. Sign 4, a deep restlessness in your spirit. There is a stirring that happens when God is getting ready to shift your life, a discomfort deep in your soul, a feeling that something more is coming even if you do not yet see it. It is not anxiety, and it is not fear, it is the Holy Spirit awakening something within you. This restlessness is not a sign of trouble, it is a divine signal that you are on the verge of something greater. Look at Nehemiah. He lived in the palace of the Persian king, surrounded by wealth and comfort. Yet when he heard about the broken walls of Jerusalem, something inside of him would not let him rest. He could have ignored it. He could have silenced the burden. But instead he leaned into it, and because he did, God used him to rebuild an entire city. This is how God works. He places a holy discontent in your spirit to push you toward your assignment. If Nehemiah had ignored that feeling, he would have missed his destiny. If Moses had ignored the burden for his people, he would have never confronted Pharaoh. If Jesus had ignored his calling, he would have never gone to the cross. Have you felt this lately? A sense that you were made for more, a stirring that will not go away. Jeremiah 29 says, "But if I say, I will not mention his word or speak any more in his name, his word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. I am weary of holding it in, indeed I cannot." That is what happens when God is calling you higher. You cannot ignore it. You cannot silence it. It will burn within you until you respond. But here is the danger: many people suppress this feeling. They convince themselves that they are being ungrateful for wanting more. They tell themselves that they should just be content where they are. And while gratitude is important, there is a difference between being thankful and being stagnant. If God has placed a deep stirring in your spirit, do not ignore it. It is a divine calling. It is a sign that your current level is too small for what He has in store for you. Remember Peter? When Jesus called him out of the boat to walk on water, Peter could have stayed where he was. He could have ignored the pull. But something in him longed for more. Something in him knew that he was meant to step out. And the moment he responded, he experienced a supernatural miracle. What if Peter had refused? What if he had silenced the stirring? He would have missed the very thing God was calling him into. Do not silence the fire within you. If God is stirring your spirit, it means He is leading you into a new season. But here is the challenge: you cannot move forward if you are still clinging to the past. Some people feel the stirring but refuse to act. They let fear hold them back. They let uncertainty paralyze them. But God does not give you a vision without also giving you the grace to walk into it. If you are restless, it is because your spirit already knows what your mind has yet to accept. You are not meant to stay where you are. God is calling you to step forward, to trust Him, to move beyond what is comfortable and walk into the unknown. So I ask you, will you listen? Or will you ignore the stirring and remain where you are? Because one thing is certain: when God is calling you higher, staying the same is no longer an option. Sign 5: Facing unexpected challenges. There is a common misunderstanding about hardship. Many believe that when difficulties arise, it is a sign that God has abandoned them. They question why. After praying for a breakthrough, they seem to be met with even greater resistance. Why, after asking for elevation, they encounter setback after setback. But I want to challenge this thinking today. What if your trials are not a sign of abandonment, but a confirmation of God's preparation? All throughout Scripture, we see a pattern. Before God elevates someone, He tests them. Before He entrusts them with greater responsibility, He refines them through adversity. Look at Job. He was a righteous man, blessed abundantly by God. Yet in a single moment, everything was stripped away: his wealth, his health, even his children. From the outside, it seemed like punishment. But what did Job say? But He knows the way that I take. When He has tested me, I will come forth as gold. Job 23:10. Job understood something many of us fail to see. The trials were not for his destruction, they were for his refinement. Could it be that the unexpected challenges you are facing are not there to break you, but to build you? Could it be that the very thing you are praying to escape is the thing God is using to equip you? Jesus Himself said, "Every branch that does bear fruit, He prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful." John 15:2. Pruning is painful. It involves cutting away what is unnecessary, trimming what is overgrown. But why does a gardener prune a tree? Because if left unchecked, the tree will never reach its full potential. It may grow, but its growth will be weak and unbalanced. Only through pruning can it become strong and bear lasting fruit. So, if you are facing unexpected challenges, ask yourself, is God pruning me for a greater purpose? Joseph had a dream of leadership, yet before he stepped into the palace, he was thrown into a pit. He was sold into slavery. He was falsely accused and imprisoned. If you had seen him in that season, you would have thought his dream was dead. But what looked like a setback was actually a setup. Because of those very trials, he was positioned for greatness. If Joseph had not been sold, he would have never entered Egypt. If he had not been accused, he would have never been placed in Pharaoh's prison. If he had not been in prison, he would have never interpreted Pharaoh's dream. And if he had never interpreted Pharaoh's dream, he would have never been promoted to second in command over all of Egypt. The very things that seemed to be working against him were the things God was using to position him. What if the same is happening in your life? What if the difficulties you are facing are not obstacles, but stepping stones? What if the very opposition coming against you is the sign that you are on the brink of a major breakthrough? The enemy does not attack those who are standing still. He comes after those who are moving forward. He does not fight people who pose no threat. He fights those who are about to step into something greater. Could this be why you are facing such intense resistance? Could this be why things seem to be getting harder, not easier? Isaiah 48:10 says, "See, I have refined you. Though not as silver, I have tested you in the furnace of affliction." Notice the words furnace of affliction. A furnace is not a gentle place. It is a place of extreme heat, a place where impurities are burned away, a place where what is weak is removed, leaving only what is strong. God does not prepare His chosen in comfort. He prepares them in fire. Daniel's faith was tested when he was thrown into the lion's den. The 3 Hebrew boys were tested when they were thrown into the fiery furnace. Paul was tested through persecution, imprisonment, and shipwrecks. Yet in every case, the trial was the very thing that led to elevation. What was meant to destroy them became the platform for their promotion. If you are facing trials, do not ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Instead, ask God, "What are you preparing me for?" Because the enemy does not waste his time on people who are going nowhere. He attacks those who are stepping into purpose. Perhaps you are in a place right now where nothing makes sense. You are doing everything right, yet nothing seems to be working. You are walking in obedience, yet the challenges keep coming. You are praying, yet heaven seems silent. But remember this: God is not punishing you. He is preparing you. You cannot become who you are meant to be without enduring the process. You cannot develop unshakable faith without first walking through seasons that require faith. You cannot be entrusted with greater things if you have not first been faithful in trials. James 1:2-4 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." God is shaping you through this. Every battle is making you stronger. Every challenge is deepening your faith. Every storm is preparing you for what is coming next. So if you are facing unexpected challenges, do not lose heart. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. You are being positioned. Because after the fire comes the elevation. After the test comes the promotion. After the battle comes the victory. Will you trust that God knows what He is doing? Will you endure the process, knowing that this is not the end, this is preparation for your next level? Sign 6, a call to let go of certain habits or relationships. When God prepares you for a major level up, He will always call you to release something. It may be a habit, a mindset, a toxic relationship, or even a place of comfort. Letting go is never easy, but it is necessary. You cannot hold on to the old and expect to step into the new. You cannot carry excess weight and expect to run the race set before you. Think of Abraham. When God called him, He didn't give him a full roadmap. He didn't explain every detail. He simply said, "Go from your country, your people and your father's household to the land I will show you." Genesis 12:1. God didn't tell him exactly where he was going. He didn't offer a safety net or a backup plan. He simply required obedience. And what did Abraham do? He left. He let go of everything familiar, his homeland, his comfort, his old way of life, because he trusted that what God had for him was greater than what he was leaving behind. Could it be that God is asking you to do the same? There is a weight that comes with carrying what no longer serves you. Some people hold on to habits that God has been telling them to release. They know deep inside that certain behaviors, certain distractions, certain indulgences are keeping them from growing. Yet they cling to them because they are familiar. They justify them. They convince themselves that these things are not harmful, but deep inside, their spirit knows otherwise. When God prepares you for a major level up, He requires purification. He will ask you to put away childish things. He will call you to a higher standard. He will strip away the things that slow you down. The question is, are you willing to let go? Hebrews 12:1 says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us." Notice the wording, throw off everything that hinders. Not just sin, but anything that slows you down. Some things in your life may not be outright sinful, but they are still weights. They are distractions. They are obstacles to your elevation. Some people hold on to toxic relationships, friendships that drain them, connections that keep them tied to old cycles. They know deep inside that these people are not aligned with where God is taking them, yet they refuse to let go. But here's the truth: you cannot take everyone with you. Not everyone can handle your next level. Some people are only meant to be part of your journey for a season. And when their time is up, holding on to them will only hinder your growth. Jesus himself demonstrated this. When he was preparing for his greatest assignment, the cross, he withdrew from the crowds. He left behind even some of his closest disciples and went further into the Garden of Gethsemane alone. There are some seasons in life where you must walk alone with God. Not everyone is meant to go with you. Not everyone is meant to understand. If God has been nudging your spirit to walk away from something, do not ignore it. Delayed obedience is still disobedience. When God calls you to release something, he is not trying to take something from you, he is trying to make room for something greater. Think about the rich young ruler in Mark 10:17-22. He had everything: wealth, status, a good reputation. But when Jesus told him to sell his possessions and follow him, he walked away sad. He could not let go of what he had, even though what Jesus was offering was far greater. He held on to temporary treasures and in doing so forfeited eternal glory. Could it be that what you refuse to release is the very thing holding you back? Could it be that your attachment to the past is delaying your promotion? God cannot bless what you refuse to surrender. If he is calling you to step out of a relationship, it is because he sees what you cannot. If he is asking you to change your habits, it is because he knows what is required for your next season. If he is pressing you to leave behind an old way of thinking, it is because your mindset must shift before your life can. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight." Trust requires release. You cannot hold on to your understanding and expect to walk by faith. You cannot grip the familiar and still expect to experience the supernatural. So I ask you today, what is God asking you to let go of? What are you holding on to that is keeping you from stepping into the fullness of what he has for you? What excuses are you making for not surrendering completely? Some doors will not open until you let go of what is in your hands. Some prayers will not be answered until you take the step of faith. Some breakthroughs will not come until you fully surrender. The longer you hold on to what is not meant for you, the longer you delay what is. If God is asking you to let go, do not resist. Do not hesitate. Do not allow fear to keep you bound to something that is beneath your calling. When you trust him enough to release, you will find that what he has prepared for you is far greater than anything you thought you needed. Sign 7. A renewed desire for God's presence. When God is preparing you for a major level up, one of the most powerful signs is a deep, unshakable longing for his presence, a hunger that cannot be satisfied by anything else. The things that once entertained you no longer hold meaning. The conversations that once excited you now seem empty. The distractions that once consumed your time now feel meaningless. There is a stirring in your spirit, an undeniable pull to seek God in a way you never have before. This is not a coincidence. This is not something you are imagining. It is a divine invitation. God is calling you deeper. He is drawing you closer, because what is coming requires a new level of spiritual strength. Your next season will demand a stronger foundation, a greater awareness of his voice, and a deeper intimacy with him. Think about Moses. He had already seen God perform mighty wonders. He saw the Red Sea part. He saw water flow from a rock. He saw manna fall from heaven. Yet, despite all of these miracles, his deepest cry was, "Show me your glory." Exodus 33:18. He wasn't content with just knowing about God. He wasn't satisfied with just experiencing his blessings. He wanted more. He wanted to dwell in his presence. And God answered. But notice something: before God revealed his glory to Moses, he called him up to the mountain. Exodus 24:12 says, "The Lord said to Moses, 'Come up to me on the mountain and stay here, and I will give you the tablets of stone with the law and commandments I have written for their instruction.'" God called him higher. He separated him from the noise. He brought him into a place of solitude, away from the people, away from distractions, so that he could encounter God in a way he never had before. This is exactly what happens when God is about to elevate you. He calls you higher. He places a desire in your spirit to seek Him, to pray more, to fast, to spend more time in His Word, not because He requires it, but because He knows you will need it. He knows that where He is taking you, you cannot afford to be spiritually weak. You cannot afford to be distant from Him. The battles ahead will require a greater level of faith, and He is strengthening you now so that you will be prepared when the time comes. Look at Jesus. Before He began His public ministry, He spent 40 days in the wilderness, fasting, praying, preparing. Before He chose His disciples, He spent the entire night in prayer. Before He went to the cross, He withdrew to Gethsemane to seek the Father's will. In every major transition, Jesus sought the presence of God. He did not rush ahead without direction. He did not move without first being strengthened in the Spirit. And if the Son of God needed to seek the Father before stepping into His next season, how much more do we? That longing you feel, the desire to be in God's presence, the pull to shut out distractions and spend more time with Him, that is not random. It is God drawing you closer because He is preparing you for something greater. Psalm 42:1 says, "As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, my God." When God is about to elevate you, He increases your hunger for Him. You start craving His word more. You start sensing a deep need to be in prayer. You find yourself yearning for moments of silence where you can just be in His presence. This is because your spirit knows what your mind has not yet realized. Something is coming, and you need to be spiritually prepared for it. Many people miss their next season because they ignore this call. They get caught up in distractions. They allow busyness to rob them of the time they should be spending with God. They sense the pull but dismiss it, thinking they will get to it later. But let me tell you, when God is calling you deeper, do not delay. There is a reason He is placing this hunger in you now. There is a reason He is stirring your heart at this moment. Something is coming, and He wants you to be ready. Think of the 5 wise and 5 foolish virgins in Matthew 25. The wise ones kept their lamps filled with oil, ready for the bridegroom's arrival. But the foolish ones waited too long. They did not prepare, and when the time came, it was too late. The oil represents the presence of God, the anointing, the readiness of our spirits. When God is calling you into deeper prayer, deeper worship, deeper surrender, it is because He is filling your lamp. He is equipping you so that when the moment comes, you will not be caught unprepared. So I ask you, are you paying attention to the hunger in your spirit? Are you responding to the call? Because here's the truth: your next level is not just about external success. It is about spiritual strength. It is about being able to hear God clearly in the midst of uncertainty. It is about walking in alignment with His will, even when the path is unclear. This is why you cannot afford to ignore the call to seek Him. Some doors will only open through prayer. Some battles will only be won through fasting. Some revelations will only come in moments of deep worship. God is preparing you, but He is not forcing you. You must choose to answer the call. You must decide whether you will allow distractions to rob you of what He is trying to deposit in you. You must choose whether you will press into His presence or stay at a surface level. And here's the reality: your next level depends on it. The depth of your relationship with God will determine the strength of your foundation when you step into what He has for you. If you have been feeling this stirring, this deep longing to seek Him like never before, do not resist it. Lean into it. Allow Him to fill you, to strengthen you, to prepare you. Because when the time comes to step into your next season, you will not just be ready, you will be unshakable. Everything you have been experiencing, the discomfort, the delays, the isolation, the deep restlessness, the unexpected challenges, the call to release certain things, and the renewed hunger for God is not random. It is not a series of unfortunate events. It is divine preparation. God is shifting you, molding you, refining you, and positioning you for something greater than you can imagine. But here's the question, will you recognize it? So many people pray for elevation, but when the preparation begins, they resist it. They pray for new levels, but they cling to old habits. They ask for greater blessings, but they refuse to let go of what is holding them back. Do not let that be you. If you have been feeling uncomfortable in places that once felt familiar, it is because God is calling you higher. If you have been experiencing delays and closed doors, it is because God is aligning something better. If you have found yourself more isolated, it is because God is removing distractions to prepare you. If you have felt a deep stirring in your spirit, it is because your soul already knows that your current season is too small for what is coming. If you have been facing intense battles, it is because the enemy sees your potential and is trying to stop you before you step into it. If you have been called to let go of certain people, habits, or mindsets, it is because they cannot go where God is taking you. And if you have been experiencing an undeniable hunger for God, it is because He is calling you into deeper relationship with Him, because your next level requires a stronger foundation in Him. You cannot afford to ignore these signs. You cannot afford to stay the same.